Everyone knows he brought his jailers to his inauguration, which had huge symbolic impact. But as a politician and as a president, more important was the fact that he put the leaders of the parties who had imprisoned him in his cabinet.
Asked, what is your name? I told him my African name, He says, no, I don't want that one. You must have a Christian name. So I say, no, I don't have one. She says, from today, you are going to be Nelson. That's how I earned the name Nelson, not given by my parents.
I'm not going to the Truth Commission. I am not going to repent. I am not going to ask for favors. What I did for my country.
When you come up
Pik Botha was part of successive white governments that kept Nelson Mandela in jail, and he then served under Mandela in South Africa's first democratic cabinet. As UN ambassador and then as foreign minister, it was his task to publicly defend the continued imprisonment of Nelson Mandela and other political opponents. But privately, Botha maintains he long lobbied for Mandela's release.
we handed over power. But we were not capitulating. You do not capitulate and surrender when you do the right thing. You liberate yourself. And that's what we did. It was not a capitulation, it was liberation.
Hello. That's right, people. Mandela is a scam. Today I'm going to take you on a journey of enlightenment for many of you, because a lot of history that you guys have been taught, a lot of information is misinterpreted. It's a lot of illusion. There's a lot of things happening that you don't realize that, you know what, we've been played here. So let me present to you the reasons why I'm saying Mandela is a motherfucking scam.
Since the ANC came to power, inequality among blacks has risen as the class gap has opened up. People power is being taken over by a black elite, an extension of the black middle class created by the Apartheid regime as a buffer to real change.
In terms of South Africa's policies towards the rest of the world, I read that in Bangkok this year you said we are willing to deal with any region irrespective of the internal policies of any country. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah, certainly.
What would have happened to South Africa, though, if that had been applied to the ANC during the struggle? If that attitude of tolerance had been applied, surely apartheid might have lasted longer than it did.
There's a real fundamental difference with apartheid. There is no country anywhere in the world where discrimination and oppression is part of the legal system.
But Mandela, along with de Klerk, won a Nobel Peace Prize for peace. Just to give the comparison to Obama, Obama did jack shit. He just said, change. America needs to change. And the war in Afghanistan. And the war in Iraq. And they said, here's a fucking Nobel Peace Prize. De Klerk and Mandela are more or less the same. Mandela just blah, 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 went to prison, came out. Peace and unity to the people. White, black, all of us together. And de Klerk was just there going, yeah, dit is goed. Dit is baie goed. Wat die dakies praat. The darkie prating. Goed. And the people of this country, we need to work together. We are one. We are South Africa. And then they basically gave him a Nobel Peace Prize for that. The Mandela you have built up in your head is a marketing and PR manifestation.
Man, hey.
So you may be confused. Wait, Mandela did a lot of things. What are you talking about? He's the first black president. Let's turn back the clock of time. Mandela joined the ANC in the mid-40s. He starts going to school and all that stuff. Sure, he has political activism. He's rebellious in nature. Yeah, he's a young man. Name me any young black man who doesn't have a rebellious nature to themselves. Anyways, moving on. The man basically becomes a lawyer, works for white people, and then he meets his bestie, Oliver Tambo. By the way, this is during the time where black people are getting brutalized, right? But there is also a black middle class, which Mandela and his bestie, Oliver Tambo, but we're focusing on Mandela right now, come from. Remember that.
Since the ANC came to power, inequality among blacks has risen as the class gap has opened up. People power is being taken over by a black elite, an extension of the black middle class created by the apartheid regime as a buffer to real change.
You must remember that the best way to introduce transformation is to do so without dislocating any aspect of our public life. And we do not want to challenge big business in a way where they can take fright and take away their monies. We are changing the whole economic aspect of this country, but it has to be done skillfully.
Apartheid's chief economic manager, Chris Stiles, governor of the Reserve Bank under the old regime, kept his job. The former economic system, he said, had served the country well.
So, what are the main things that a lot of people say Mandela is accredited for being so great? One of the main things, if you search Mandela legacy, what did he actually do? Mandela is accredited with starting the ANC Youth League. It is stated by some sources Mandela was instrumental in forming the Youth League as the disgruntled youth of the ANC was upset that nothing is happening, blah, 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 fish paste, and all that woo bourgeoisie shit. Guess what? If you really read into it, if you really go deep more than the superficial article that you just read, you realize Anton Lembede is one of the main people who created the ANC Youth League. He was the president. He was the first president, for crying out loud. And if you look at the first executive committee of the ANC Youth League, Mandela's not anywhere to be seen. Walter Sisulu is there though. His bestie Oliver Tambo is there. But where's Mandela? I thought he was one of the people that created it. You would think if you were instrumental in creating said organization, you would at least be part of the executive committee. Makes you think, don't it? What they say about the Youth League is Mandela was the one advocating the then President Uma about the Youth League and the distraction. But you'll notice that there isn't really evidence for that. It seems like his name has been shoehorned in to make him seem like he was a pivotal role when he really wasn't. In actual fact, when you look at the facts, Mandela didn't do anything for the ANC Youth League. The ANC Youth League, by the way, was short-lived, FYI people, because as soon as the apartheid system started ramping up and banned, there was no more Youth League. The focus was more on the ANC mainstay. Mandela didn't do much. In fact, he was part of the general group of activists who said, I'm with you, Anton Lembede. I'm with you. I want to support. But he's not in the executive. He's not accredited with any political writings or any policies that is coming up for the ANC Youth League. None of that. So, debunked. Mandela did not start the Youth League.
Ma'am, can you give me protection from yourself?
Once Mandela basically started working for the ANC, right, and he did his pencil pushing work, and remember, he is a lawyer, so there is benefit for him being an articles pusher and doing all that legally stuff, whatever, along with Oliver Tambo. This is when he's going up the rank now because one, his bestie is Oliver Tambo. Let's not forget that. I would argue Oliver Tambo is more influential and more instrumental in the ANC than Mandela ever was. It seems like Mandela was just the best friend of the real G of the ANC. That's just my opinion. Because he's besties with the real G, what happens? He gets promoted within the party. Only in the 50s. Then you see Mandela really ramping up, where now he's appointed into the executive committee. But do you think Mandela did something during that time? Do you really think, what legal scholarly work did Mandela do in the 50s? Let's recap. Around 1952, along with the other executives of the ANC, they got charged with treason. Eventually the case was dismissed and they only, I think, did 9 months in prison But it's not because of something Mandela initiated or instigated. It's more like the apartheid regime clapping back and making sure they're taking care of their leadership. But Mandela was not an influential leader. He was not a prolific leader. He was not a thought leader. None of that.
Wait a minute. Who are you?
Because around this same period, people are gonna forget. This is just a little side thing, but I'm showcasing the character that is Mandela that is obviously omitted from the history books and documentaries and adulation of Mandela. Mandela was married for 14 years, people, to his first wife, Evelyn Mase. Nobody talks that much about her. Everybody talks about Winnie Mandela. Everybody talks about Grasa, whatever her name is. I forgot her name, right? Everybody talks about her. Everybody talks about Winnie. But nobody wants to also remember Evelyn. A woman was dedicated to this man for 14 years. Allegedly, he was a cheater. He was a manhole. This idol of yours, people, was a manhole.
Oh, well, I went to Oxford, where I excelled in several subjects, but I ended up specializing in foreign languages. You know, I really wanted to travel. You know, sort of see the world.
That's fascinating, Vanessa. Listen, why don't we go in the back and shag?
Manhole. And don't come to me and saying, oh no, he was young, dumb, full of cum. The man was almost in his 40s. The man basically, allegedly also, because according to one of the reasons why she initiated the divorce initially in 1956, she said the man was abusive. I doubt she was saying that out of clout, because there was no social media back then. There was no believe all women. There wasn't any clout for our grandmothers and our great-grandmothers during that period. In fact, black women, I would argue, got it the harshest, more than black men, in my opinion, due to the fact that black men also suppressed black women back in the day. It's an unfortunate truth that we all have to admit. Our grandfathers and our great-grandfathers, some of them, or a lot of them, I don't know the stats, were shit towards women.
Not the worst thing to slap a woman now and then. As I remember, you said you don't do it with a clenched fist, it's better to do it with an open hand. Yeah, remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I didn't love that.
I haven't changed my opinion.
You haven't?
No.
If you look at his bestie, Oliver Tambo, and you look at his other compatriot, Walter Sisulu, all of these men have always been married and stayed married with their wives. Struggle and all. Everything going on. They stayed loyal to their women. On paper. I don't know. Maybe they also cheated. They maybe also abusive. I don't know. But one thing I know for sure, they stayed married to their women. They don't have that big of a reputation of being man whores like Mandela. Lillian Ngoyi allegedly had a love child with Mandela. Allegedly, people. Allegedly.
Ain't nobody got time for that.
So during this period also, whilst he was married for 14 years, having kids with this woman, another thing that I would argue is his first contribution to black excellence, to the black community, to black South Africans, was opening up a first black law firm along with his bestie, Oliver Tambo. Great. So you would think, hey, you're an educated lawyer. You went through the struggles in Wits University as being one of the first black students or the first black students in law. You went through all this nonsense and shit. You would realize, hey, let's go within the system and try to fight it within. Let's try and present maybe legal arguments. Let's go to the Supreme Court, fight against the laws. Did he do that? Him and his bestie. Did they do that?
Computer says no.
They didn't do any of that. In fact, I don't see any records of them making a legal landmark precedent or trying to go through the law and saying, hey, black folk are just as good as white folk. Can we also have equal rights? Nothing legal. No legal scholarly articles, writings, or petitions did I see Oliver Tambo and Mandela put through within the system that they're working in right now. All I see is black middle class, black lawyers living a cushy life, but on the side fighting for black folk. That's what I'm seeing. Specifically, Mandela was nothing more than just another black middle class guy just living life. Sure, he may have political views here and there, but don't disrupt the status quo.
You're not addressing the issue. The issue is the reason we love Nelson Mandela is because he made a deal with the white elites, the power structures, the De Beers, the Oppenheimers, to remain in power, and he wouldn't touch their wealth, he wouldn't share their wealth, and that's why we in England love him, because the press tells us to. He betrayed the people of South Africa. And I'm frightened that unless you actually address the fact that the laws of South Africa doesn't make the corporations share the wealth as the Freedom Charter of 56 demands, my fear is nothing will change.
What is the next big point that Mandela is attributed before he went to prison? He started Umkhonto weSizwe.
Umkhonto weSizwe was formed and launched in 1960. It's formed in 1961 and it's launched in December that year as the military wing of a group of activists linked with the African National Congress and its allies. So its commander-in-chief, the first one was Nelson Mandela, his deputy was Joe Slovo. Mandela's an ANC member, Slovo is a South African Communist Party member. Their original operations were the perpetration of sabotage within South Africa. The sabotage campaign doesn't work because it leads to increased repression, after which the ANC moves towards guerrilla warfare from 1962 onwards.
Umkhonto weSizwe was not even his brainchild at all. In fact, let's just step back a minute. How did Umkhonto weSizwe become what it is? Why did it form? Let's run back. Sharpeville massacre happens. The sentiment of non-violence is decimating. People are like, we are tired of just being non-violent whilst we're being brutalized by the white man, by these white Afrikaners. It's not just white Afrikaners, to be fair. It is the white man, because even the British were joining in on the fun. So you have during this period Robert Sobukwe forming the PAC after the Sharpeville massacre. They're tired of ANC being passive aggressive. And remember, there was a lot of turmoil internally within the ANC at that time because a lot of people like Robert Sobukwe felt there was a lot of selling out that was going on within the ANC. A lot of passive aggressiveness, a lot of passive more than aggressive.
The MK is a collaborative effort by multiple people. Mandela, as a populist, and realizing the energy shift within the members of the ANC that they want payback. They are done being passive and non-violent and all that fancy flowery stuff. He just voiced what the popular opinion to the leadership as he was part of the NEC. People like Ben Turok, Yusuf Dadoo, Bram Fisher and others were already saying they should be an arm's wing of the ANC. Michael Hermel is credited as presenting a proposal of a move towards arms. And it is said that that proposal was presented to individuals within the ANC. And this is back in 1960, right after the Sharpeville massacre. Now, we can deduce that Mandela was one of the key ANC individuals this proposal was made to. Fast forward to 1961, Mandela presents this proposal of a military wing to the Greater Party. Now, it is of my personal belief, since Mandela and the other ANC leaders were bailed out by the Oppenheimers during the 1950s treason charges that they faced, Mandela, being the leader of the MK, was a subversion tactic. Because Mandela has said, if I'm not mistaken, that the MK wants to sabotage the apartheid system and infrastructure without hurting people or cause the least amount of damage. Make that make sense. You are in a liberation war and you want to cause the least amount of damage to the enemy, the same enemy that killing all blacks systematically and en masse. You have empathy for the enemy when the enemy has none for you? This is why I see Mandela more of a subversion tactic within the MK to make sure they don't do that much damage. But then again, hey, he started the MK, right?
I think you captured it very well. There's no any better explanation than the explanation you have given. The deviation from the Freedom Charter was the beginning of selling out the revolution. But why did Nelson Mandela sell out the Freedom Charter? When Nelson Mandela returned from prison, he got separated with Winnie Mandela and went to stay in a house of the rich white men. He was looked after by the Oppenheimers. Nelson Mandela used to attend the club meetings of those white men who owned the South African economy at the time. He stayed in their complex. He stayed with them. He stayed in one of their houses. They had access to him 24 hours. And they told him that what he represents will not be achieved. And then that's when he turned against himself. Because the Nelson we are celebrating now is not the Nelson we celebrated before prison and during prison. It's a staged, managed Nelson Mandela who compromised the fundamental principles of the revolution, which are well captured in the Freedom Charter.
As we go through this, I'm realizing he didn't start Mkhonto in Sizwe. He did not start the ANC Youth League. He was not even instrumental to that formation. All I see is a man who happens to be friends with one of the more influential people in ANC, and he's piggybacking off his bestie, and he's just enjoying that gravy chain. Sure, got arrested here, got have to move in secrecy because he's part of the ANC. It's cool. It's cool being part of the ANC. Or the only formal organization and organizing and mobilizing that I'm seeing from Mandela is post-Sharpeville massacre. It's Mandela doing the All Africa Conference that was done in Pietermaritzburg, if I remember correctly. So all of the stuff that you're noticing from Mandela, it's like he's just mobilized. To be fair to him, he's doing more. He's not doing anything unique, nothing extra special that warrants this adulation and praise that he gets. That's my issue. Why is this man loved so much in this sainthood way? Why is he such a saint? What's so special about him? So far, nothing. I see more special people than him, who've done more than him, who've organized better, who've come up with actual tangible ideas that are implemented till they die. But Mandela is not one of them. As I'm looking through Mandela's history, checking out all the stuff about him, I pick up something. Hey, he only started being really, really famous during the Rivonia trials. If you notice, that's when he starts being put on TV, having interviews, being the face. Highlight that. Being the face, not the main guy, the face of anti-apartheid. Barely 10 years into his prison sentence, he gets visited by the Minister of Police, Jimmy Kruger. Allegedly, they didn't get along. Really, Mandela? You didn't get along with the police? You didn't? Why did the Minister of Police visit you, Mandela? Why? Why? Oh, this is when he also meets the British leader of the Labour Party at that time. Interesting. I find it interesting that the man who did the least is visited by a lot of white powerful people. Not just in the apartheid government, the British government also. Don't you find that interesting? That you have the British opposition leader in the Labour Party visiting him. So this is when now you notice, okay, he's being visited by powerful white people. The man has a history of having white people favor him as a black middle class man. I am hating on that a little bit, I'm just hating a little. But anyways, all I'm gonna say is, from all the research that I'm checking, the earliest I see the great PR machine churning in favor of Mandela as being the face of anti-apartheid. Here in South Africa, a lot of people already were aware of Mandela, right? The Rivonia trials, the initial arrest in the 1950s, along with the leadership of ANC. Mandela is politically well known, okay, in South Africa. It's like, you know how I equate Mandela? It's like Fikile Mbalula. Fikile Mbalula has been famous for a long time. He was the ANC youth president. The man has been minister after another minister portfolio. The dude has been around. He's famous in this country only. He hasn't done shit, but he's still famous. So that's how I look at Mandela back in the day. He was already known within South Africa. Internationally though, that's where the big brain things happen. Because on his 60th birthday in 1978, the United Nations, they had a committee for anti-apartheid, by the way. The most useless committee ever. Sure, people will say the sanctions worked. Read Apartheid, Guns and Money. Please read that book. Apartheid and Our Friends. Please read that book. Sanctions didn't work. In fact, sanctions made them richer. Sanctions made the apartheid government richer, stronger, and more prolific in espionage. So let's get back to it. In 1978, 60th birthday, the UN anti-apartheid, committee, those guys, what do? They send a birthday card to Mandela's signed petition and all that stuff, and they promote, oh, free Mandela, oh my gosh, the boom too.
This campaign has drawn support from MPs as well as the public, and for these protesters the cold and rain weren't enough to deter them from making a stand against a regime they call racist and unjust. The picket began in April 1986 when President Botha began talking about releasing Nelson Mandela but refused to act. The pickets want Mandela and other political prisoners given their freedom and also sanctions imposed against South Africa. Richard Rokes, who's treasurer of the City of London anti-apartheid group, has been on the picket since it started, 3 times a week. He says nothing will stop their campaign.
I think we can put up with a bit of cold and a bit of rain when people in South Africa are facing the guns and the bullets and the whole military might of the apartheid regime.
But Minister Justice de Goerd says the picket, while disrupting staff, hadn't made any difference at all.
The group hasn't affected the functions of the embassy fundamentally, but it is very often, don't forget, the British public who in fact bear the brunt of these activities surrounding the group. I must emphasize the picket does not have any practical effect on the question of Mandela. The state president the South African state president has made a clear offer as far as Mandela is concerned. He has the ability, if you like, to release himself if he makes certain undertakings. And this is where we stand at the moment.
So this is when Mandela's popularity is rising. He's been thrown in there by the establishment, especially the British. The British were ramping up on it. The British public was being told how bad it is. Oh, help South Africa, this and this. Where is that money coming from? Anyways, coming back to Mandela. If you look from 1978, the big celebrations, what was interesting is, a couple years later, 4 years later to be specific, in 1982, he gets transported out of Robben Island to Pollsmoor prison, a more comfy prison. This is Mandela moving to a much more less harsh, less secure prison. Sure, maybe him. It was not just him and his other. The reason that the apartheid government gave back then was, oh no, he's radicalizing the youth or the other prisoners we are putting in Robben Island. So we have to separate them away to Pollsmoor prison, where he gets more privileges, where he gets visited more often by the Oppenheimers.
Oh man, oh God, oh man, oh God, oh man, oh God, oh man.
It is alleged Mandela was moved to Pollsmoor prison in 1982 to be more freely accessible to the oligarchs. This is the same time that a lot of people like myself believe Mandela was being a sellout. And if you look around the same time, this is when Mandela, the PR machine, ramps up. This is when you notice a lot of concerts are being held. The anti-apartheid movement that was formed in Britain, which was financed thanks to monies that we cannot really pinpoint where it comes from, because I've tried to look with open source information. Maybe it's the lack of my research capabilities, but if you look at the history of the anti-apartheid movement, which started in Britain, in London, it is very much linked with the Committee of African Affairs. If you know anything about that, you will look it up. It has heavy links to the College of Economics in London, which therefore is in Oxford, and there's a lot of establishment hands all over that organization. Yeah, Vela Pillay started the anti-apartheid movement in London. But if you look at Vela's history, the man is closely linked and educated by the British establishment. So that's one of the things that I want to highlight, is that the British were already hedging their bets from the get-go. They saw this apartheid system eventually will collapse, and they had to hedge their bets. They were already negotiating and talking with the ANC. By me saying they, I'm talking about the oligarchs, the Oppenheimers, and all the likes. Now, Harry Oppenheimer was I would argue, the most single influential businessman in South Africa. He ran South Africa. Harry Oppenheimer is alleged to have his hands in involvement in the assassination of the architect of apartheid, which is another interesting story on its own, which I will definitely talk about in the future.
We shall fight for our existence, and we shall survive.
That was the voice of South Africa's Prime Minister Hendrik Verwoerd shortly before he came close to death. A cattle show at the Union Exposition in Johannesburg caught his interest, and he returned to the stands to watch the prize animals march by. Despite unrest in the country, all seemed peaceful here. Then suddenly gunshots and confusion. A would-be assassin is hauled off, and the Prime Minister clutches his wounded head. He is hit by two .22 caliber bullets fired at close range by a wealthy cattle farmer who was an official at the fair.
Then came the shock news. Dr. Hendrik Verwoerd, South African Premier, had been assassinated. At South Africa House in London, people gathered. The man they called the chief architect of apartheid was dead, stabbed to death as he sat in Parliament. White and coloured alike deplored the bloody violence.
The anti-apartheid movement, which started in London, in the whole banking and the financier halls of London, even though a South African, his name is there as the person, he didn't have the money. Vela Pillay did not have the money. The people behind him already were giving him the money. Sure, at the beginning, in the 50s, the 60s, it was fairly quiet. It was not that much. It was more of in solidarity, but nothing substantial. You see the ramp up post-1980s, where P.W. Botha, this is my belief, that P.W. Botha ruined it for everybody else in the white community in South Africa, because the stubborn Afrikaner did not want to listen. He did not want to listen to British rule or the British money that owns South Africa. He was like,
no, we'll do it live. Fuck it.
So this is where the ramp up of the funding for the anti-apartheid establishment picks up astronomically, whereby you're seeing concerts, you're seeing politicians, you're seeing all these other people now getting involved. The funny irony is, as much as there were these British people who were supporting the anti-apartheid movement, they've been benefiting in the apartheid system all along. Mandela was a hedge bet, which paid out. That is all that I'm noticing. Because like I said, the PR machine that is Mandela was manufactured. Because let's recap. Mandela was no intellectual leader. He did not come up with any scholarly debates, did not form any scholarly papers, did not write anything legalistically. So no, he was not an intellectual leader. Mandela was not a strategist either. Funny enough, he's not a military leader. When he was in positions where he could do some influence, where he had a legal practice, he had white people to help him further his legal arguments within the Supreme Court of South Africa to try and fight the apartheid laws, or try and do something legally, because we were seen as illegals, but he would have tried to do something legally. He didn't do any of that. All I notice is a black middle-class man helping his white buddies make money out of black misery. That's what I've noticed. He didn't start the organizations that he's alleged to have started. MK was not through him. He was basically jumping on a populist bandwagon. He did not start the Youth League. Anton Lembede is more of an intellectual leader than Mandela ever was. He's done nothing more than any other anti-apartheid activist. In fact, I would argue a lot of them have done more by giving up their lives. Mandela is a PR manufactured machine cooked up in the whole banking halls of London. Because remember, all the top brass of the ANC, Thabo Mbeki, Cyril Ramaphosa, the top chief negotiators to end South African apartheid were all schooled in London. Mandela is a product of London banking financiers. That is why he's so popular and he's so loved. He's a scam. Because if you look at the economic policies of the ANC, they're very conservative. They very much favor London banking financiers. This is why I say Mandela is a scam.